Hey, and thank you for listening to a new episode of the Business of Fun podcast. I am your host, Dave Wakeman, and my guest today is a returner, a two-timer. Hannah Grannemann is back on the Business of Fun. Before I talk to you about my conversation with Hannah, let me remind you to check out my website. It's davewakeman.com and get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. Lots of good information. I'm doing longer form podcasts these days. Or not podcasts, newsletters, giving you a little more analysis, a little more data, just something different that keeps me interested in the writing and just helping me think a little more deeply about it. So you might as well benefit. So go to talkingtickets.substack.com and sign up. Hannah Grannemann, right? She sent me a note a couple weeks back. She's like, I'm doing some research. I'm writing a book. I'd love to come and talk to you about some of the ideas because it's I've got so many of them. I don't know where to put them all. And I said, well, this is the perfect forum for such a issue. So Hannah came on and we talked about a whole lot of stuff. We talked about the relevance of the arts today. The decline in institutional funding and donors, audience experience and value created. We talked a little bit about the Kennedy Center and how they can deal with the Trump world now, but the post-Trump world afterwards. Rebuilding the arts and and what happened about rebuilding after COVID. We talked about grants and the NEA, and over-reliance on staff efficiency, especially around limited resources. We talked about the number of big donors and the need to broaden the base, mega gifts, strategic thinking, taking the time to understand the world around you, earned revenue, funding from individuals, the foundations. We talked about the silver lining of some of these emergencies. This was like a really big conversation that went all over the place. I think you're going to enjoy it. So here's my conversation with Hannah Grannemann on the Business of Fun. I want to welcome back my friend, Hannah Grannemann, to the Business of Fun. Hannah, what's up?
Good to see you.
It's really great to see you. I was great when you said, "Oh, can I come back?" I was like, yeah. Duh, you have like an open invitation. So here is a open invitation live to tape, as they say, for you to come back whenever you want to. But it's always great to talk to you. And we just had like a really great time chatting. And I was like, we probably better start recording because we're going to run out of time before we even record anything. So I'm so excited. There's a lot to talk about. I don't even know where to start, actually. But let's see, because they're all a box of worms, even
a little
bit. Because I think that things are interesting right now. So, let's talk about you're working on a book on fundraising. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Correct. And then the thing about fundraising that's interesting now is that there is a decline in institutional funding. I have a couple of questions about this, right? Which is number one, do you think that the root of the decline in the institutional funding is administration specific, or do you think it's like kind of a long-term trend? And then are you also seeing in partnership with this institutional funding decline, does that include like corporate giving? And then we can talk about the individuals and some of the grants and some of the other stuff afterwards. But I was wondering, that was like the thing that stuck out to me when I was thinking about this.
Yeah, the top of mind emergency right now is the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Institute for Museum and Library Services. It's being cut by the Trump administration. And so all of those grants, even ones that were in process and grants that were coming, have been canceled. And that is leaving a hole in the budgets of arts organizations that needs to be filled. And programs are being canceled or needing to find emergency funding in order to move forward. In the grants in the National Endowment for the Humanities are actually threatening the survival of historical sites, small museums, and because they depend on those grants more than National Endowment for the Arts recipients. I don't want to say that this is a silver, can't find a silver lining, but one thing to understand is that the National Endowment for the Arts grants are not operational grants. They are project grants. So they are not embedded in the organization's year-to-year finances in a way that grants from the IMLS and the NEH are. So in that sense, the recipients of the NEA grants are in a better
Mm-hmm.
position. That said, it's still terrible. It leaves a
Yeah.
hole now. It absolutely undermines the confidence that those would be restored. It trickles, but the big thing that I'm worried about is that it trickles down. 40% of the NEA grants get distributed to state and regional government arts councils, like in my state, the North Carolina Arts Council. So they will then cut because their budget's being trimmed, and that bleeds down to local arts. So it's going to mean a shrinkage overall of funding.
Mm-hmm.
This means that organizations need to step up their earned revenue from things like ticket sales, admissions, ancillary income, and then funding from individuals. And so that's the government funding piece. The institutional funding, the other part of the institutional funding is foundations. The foundation grants have largely go mostly to very large arts organizations, and there's been a long push within the arts community to rebalance that to mean that more small organizations and emerging organizations also are funded by foundations, which is what helps them survive and gives them some room, some ability to grow, some capacity to grow. That means, though, unless the pie gets bigger, that those large organizations get less money. And that is a difficult transition to be in. Then corporate foundations or corporate, say, sponsorships, those are marketing deals, right?
Yeah.
So that we always have to remember that the purpose of those funds is to advance the corporation's interest. And that's going to come and go. Like the corporation's going to change strategy and their commitments. And even if they are giving through, say, a corporate foundation, it
Mm-hmm.
still is ultimately dependent on the corporation strategy. So those are not things that an arts organization should really be dependent on. What can be more steady and what's under much more of their control is earned revenue and
Mm-hmm.
giving from individuals. So that's where I really think that the arts organizations should be putting their time and attention. They can control it better. They can grow it on their own terms and not be at the whim of these other institutions. So that's why my co-author and I, Jackson Cooper, are writing this book. It's going to be published by the Columbia Business School imprint of Columbia University Press in the next year or so. We're writing the second draft right now. And what we're really responding to is that, and this is for nonprofits broadly, so not just in the arts,
Mm-hmm.
that they've been more increasingly dependent on their major donors. And that is, so we have the nationwide data shows we have a shrinking number of donors, even as the dollars are growing. So that means that these organizations are more and more dependent on a few donors, which puts them at risk. So what we're advocating for in our book is to really spend serious effort on growing what we call the mid-level or the quote unquote low-level donor, the smaller donor, putting more attention to growing that base, learning about them, what are their interests, what are their values, and developing relationships with them. Because that'll broaden the base, it'll spread the risk out, and then you can start identifying people to grow over time. And that's just a more sustainable strategy for nonprofits at this time.
Oh yeah, we were talking about it just before we started recording, which is that uh, I'm on the board of my son's soccer team, and that's one of the lessons that we learned was that it was better to really start spreading from the middle out, I guess would be the thing, and hitting both the high and low end. And I think that's Robert Ciandelli. It's in the Influence, that book, but he talked about with the I want to say not the Red Cross, but like maybe it was March of Dimes. One of those, like they did a study and they found that like just saying like even a penny can help. Every little penny counts. It's
Right.
like it made people give, and it increased the number of people who gave. And I'm curious because you've been writing this book about it. How have people kind of settled on just like going all in on the number of big donors? Because I've seen it too. It's like everybody's going after the same sort of, they call them whales, right? They're same whale givers. And I'm like, well, I always was like, the more different avenues of revenue you have and the more people you have, I was like, it makes you more stable, right? Because if one person represents, or one line of revenue, anything is, 15, 20, 30% of your revenue, whatever the case might be, overwhelmingly a lot, that makes you very unstable. And I'm kind of curious from your research, where did this over reliance come from?
Yeah. Well, part of it is staff efficiency, because it's much more efficient to develop one donor and get a gift of $10,000 than put time into another donor and only get 100. So there's a matter of, if you have limited resources, and everybody has limited resources, even Coca-Cola has limited resources, right? But if you're choosing how to spend your time, you put more time into what has a bigger upside. That's one factor. The other factor is that who does the executive director pick up the phone for? Their board members and their major donors. So those are the people that have their ear. So they pay more attention to them, and it's a self-reinforcing mechanism. So as staff and leaders, we need to resist that, recognize that natural where your attention goes, and you need to push against it and make space to develop the other types of donors. We have something in fundraising called the pipeline, right? So we always need lots of donors going into one side of the pipes, and then we move them along. It's also hard to get to know lots of donors at once. If you have 100, 1,000 donors, it's harder to get to know them. Hard to justify getting to know them when they're giving at a lower level. It's easier to justify spending the time getting to know a $10,000 donor, right? And learning where they are. So it's you can see how it happens that we end up spending much more time on them, and then it's self-reinforcing, because then they do write the check. So then you do pay more attention to them. Yeah. But it's a short-term strategy. It's not a long-term strategy. So we need to be focusing on that long term more, and recognizing, you have 1,000 mid-level donors, only some portion, just accept it. Only some portion of them are going to move up and give you more over time. But the more of them but if you don't pay attention to them, then you won't have any of them that will eventually become your major donors or your board members, or those important people out spreading the word. And then something else that you point out, there is research that shows that the mega gifts, right? So the Mackenzie Scott gifts, the David Geffen gifts that are very, very big, get lots of press, are actually suppressing the people's perception that their gift matters if they're only giving $100, if they're only giving $1,000. They say, well, how could I possibly compare to one of those people that gives $100 million? My gift doesn't matter. So it's really important that nonprofit organizations message effectively that every gift really does matter, and that you are treating people, you're following through on that, and you're treating all your donors with respect, and that you value them by communicating with them, sharing what their money does, sharing how all those dollars get together and the impact that that comes out, so that that's what motivates people to give. You do need to. They give because they're trying to enact their values in the world, and you need to then reflect that back to them and say, we did it, right?
Oh yeah. Let me see. I don't want to. Okay, I'll ask it this way, because I was like, I don't want to miss 2 points. I got 2 points here. So first, we were talking about our pipeline, right? Like we have but if you think about it, and a good way I think, to reframe it for people so that they envision it, right, is that you are also in that big donor, or any donor's pipeline as well, about where am I going to prioritize my giving. And so if you think about it like this, like if there's that 1,000 mid-level donors that you have, and that let's say even all 1,000 are not going to grow into mega donors, right? We know that's true. But let's say even if 10 of them
of that 1,000 become? So 1%, because that's easy math for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
Becomes, you want to make sure that you're continuing that relationship, that you're building on it. And so then when you're talking about like, you got to reflect it back to people so they see the impact they're having. One of the projects I worked on was like for a nonprofit here in DC. And it was about strategy, right? Because my kingdom for everybody just to spend even half a day on their strategy every year, and not just like we want to do like 10% better, or we're going to like revamp our website. I'm talking about real strategy, which is like, what does success look like? Who are we really targeting? Why are they coming to us? And what resources are we going to do we need to be successful, and the actions we're going to take, like, that system that I teach.
Yeah.
Of my kingdom for that. And not just with me, just with anybody. But
Mm-hmm.
I took something as simple as their annual report that they sent out to the board members, their donors, and like the important people in there. And I said, let's make this more appealing to them, because it reads like the driest instruction manual ever. And the impact on that was like, it almost probably, I think it might have over 2 years doubled the amount of money that they were getting from those people, because then they could see the impact, right? When they got the guide, they were like, this is amazing, because it was like little graphs and pretty pictures, and it was the same data. We just made it pretty.
Right.
And
easy
so
to
great.
read at a glance.
Yeah. It
And
doesn't have to
easy
be
to digest.
suck. It can look good. It's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these things, they all matter. So I guess then that leads into the second question, which is, the first one was like, oh, these things are so like fixing them. The mindset of like, you're in the pipeline the same way they're in your pipeline.
Yes.
Is helpful. And then like, just the presentation of things, because doing good is great, but you also want to let people know how they're doing good. It's like, I'll follow my son's soccer club. When I joined the board, the club was in a decline. Still served about 5,000 kids a year. But I was recruited by the person who's the chair of the board right now. I think she's one of the fantastic nonprofit leaders in the world. I love the woman to death. I think she's amazing. She said, strategy. And she goes, I want you to come in and help this club get a strategy. And I did. And it was not easy, because it's not easy. And we turned it around. And now this year we're going to have served over 10,000 kids. So in 3 years, we doubled the number of people. So the strategy is impactful. But what is stopping people from taking this like sort of like a strategic viewpoint? Because if it's happening here in fundraising, I think a lot of the root causes, right? So like having these surprise, like an administration driven to remove all of this funding and all of these grants, it comes as a shock. Whereas like if you had a strategy, you would be better equipped to deal with it right now, and you wouldn't be frantic. Same with the pipeline, right? If you do a good, if you do a much better job of focusing on the pipeline, all these things are strategy. What stops people from setting a strategy? And maybe that's outside of the boundaries of like what you've discovered, but it seems an important like thing to focus on.
Yeah, one very systemic thing in the nonprofit that is different from for-profit is that there is so much pressure to not have a deficit every year, where, as you know, in the for-profit sector, Amazon lost money for 20 years before it turned profitable, right? So there's this pressure to make sure that you are not spending more than you have. And I agree with that. But when we think about fundraising, things take investment. You were one of the only people I ever heard put a number on the time it takes for a rebranding to land. Yeah. It takes 2 to 3 years, you said. And I have just always kept that in my mind. And so people always say, when you get, say, a new major gift officer that needs to develop relationships in your community for your nonprofit, it takes time for them to develop that relationship, because donors do not like to be rushed. They need to know and trust the people that
Yep.
they're giving to. So a new major gift officer does not pay off in quotes,
Right.
in 12 months. And that puts budget pressure on. So what we're talking about building out the middle takes time,
Yeah.
and it takes tactics that do cost money, like direct mail, like
Yep.
really good CRM, like a really good email strategy, good social media. It takes those kinds of tactics, where major gifts are developed more over lunches and coffees, and they take sustained attention, but you can also tell more how you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So, and we acknowledge this in our book. We say, if you are going to make this switch, there's going to be, and it's not so much a switch, but we acknowledge it's an
Yeah.
add-on, and it's going to be an add-on for a while. Maybe this 2 to 3 years that you're talking about, right? It's going to be a while before it turns around, because you need to experiment, you need to figure out what works, you need to get to know this donor base. So part of what stops people from doing these strategies is because it's largely unknown. It is you do have to do everything for a while, so you can't take your foot off the gas of those major gifts until this turns out. I think that why people don't do more strategy thinking is because they're not educated in it.
You're just playing to the crowd now.
Most of the people, well, I had to, and this is no disrespect to all of the really hardworking people in marketing, in communications, that are out there working for nonprofits, but they mostly don't have business training. They have mostly just come up through the ranks of the cause or the art form, and so they never got training in the more foundational parts, like strategy, that don't pay off immediately. So what they do know, because it works, kinda.
Yeah.
It works in the short term way, are tactics.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
they're very, very tactically oriented. And also there's a lot of people that just aren't strategic thinkers. It just doesn't come naturally to them. So
100%.
what I would really like to see in executive leadership and senior leadership are really people that are strategic thinkers, and that can persuade their staff, their colleagues, their board members to take that time, a half a day a year, to think about strategy. And then the last thing I'll say is that I think that people in the nonprofit sector have a hard time choosing an audience. You and I have talked about this before. We want to serve everybody. We have a really, really hard time letting go that not everybody is interested in what we do. And even admitting that even no matter how hard we might try and bring them in, they're never going to come. So we have a hard time narrowing. I am hopeful as there is. So I would like to see more strategy training, more branding training. I think we're at a moment where we need some upskilling in the field. And I think you don't have to go back and everybody doesn't need to go back and get an MBA. There are a lot of trainings out there on whether it's YouTube, or I've learned a ton from content creators that I follow on TikTok, right? And consultants like you, podcasts like this, you can learn, and you can pay to bring in consultants and that kind of thing, but you have to listen to them and do what they say. So that's my diagnosis.
Yeah, no, I think it's I have found that the need for more education, more biz training is tremendously important. And I'm not just saying that because that would be like helpful for me. I'm saying that because and this is from my experience, because I do a great deal of stuff for nonprofits pro bono. Like I have been, I've actually been investigating doing a couple of what I want to do is maybe even create like some sort of either online training or like a class, and what really would take like a couple of nonprofits through the process for for free, with the caveat that like I can say, hey, look, these are the cases, this is what I learned and everything, because I think it's so important. It's not because you need to be ruthless. I don't want you to be like ruthless. I want you to know really the foundations of these things, because they will help you do your job, right? Because any branding and strategy success I have had over time is because of the experience I had in the theater, right, and in the arts, and those things. So this is like a way for me to give back, right? Like it's not 100% of my time. So but I was like going, if you just knew that, like, here's what we do. Who is the customer, right? And understand, like, how do you segment? Because there's a huge, every business that I've worked with, no matter from the biggest to the smallest, it's not for everybody. And the danger is trying to do that. Understanding why they're picking you, because let's say I'm in DC, so the Kennedy Center works great for certain things, right? The Howard Theater works great for certain things, right? There is the Strathmore, and and it's okay for them to make those distinctions, because you want to give people the best experience. There's enough room for everybody. Like you don't have to try to serve everybody. And then how you show up matters. It's just like with the fundraising thing, right? If I get those three things across to people as far as branding, because I know those conversations aren't happening, I can guarantee you it will have this huge impact. When you're talking about some of these things about the growing out and the long-term impact, time it needs, and the effect of that, one piece of literature, I guess it would be, is a report from the IPA in the UK, and it's called The Long and Short of It. It's by Les Binet and Peter Field, and it talks, and this is super important. It is the 60-40 rule, I think they call it, which is that 60% of your budget should be spent on long-term brand building, and 40% should be on short-term sales activation. You should be thinking about that with your ticket sales, your earned revenue, but most importantly, your fundraising. Right. So break it up with those short term is like those sales activations that you can get the people in the door. 60% is like working that pipeline and getting those people so that you can grow them or keep them involved, whatever. It's super, super important. And I just wish that people would grab these ideas that are readily available and use them.
Yeah.
Because you don't necessarily have to pay someone to come in. It helps, but the thing is, I know everybody's budget strapped, so start with like some of these like really great resources. Rory Sutherland is one of the people on TikTok who's great, right? And I know Rory because I know people in that colleagues of his in London, so it's like great, but he's amazing on the TikTok, right? And you can you get those and you put those in place, and it'll feed that incentive to get people to dig in and do more.
Yeah.
And it'll give them the room to allow them to do more.
Yeah.
Let me see. I know we talked so much.
I'm good on time. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we'll keep going then. So I want to ask you then, because your latest blog post is about the Kennedy Center, and you were talking about how it's an immediate concern, but you also were trying to teach people about long-term thinking in a post-Trump world. Can you explain that a little bit to everybody?
Yeah, what I've written about most recently, just this week, was that the early subscription sales for the Kennedy Center for next season appear to be down sharply. And while I think it's great, and I support anyone that's voting with their feet to express the disappointment that they have in what's happened with the Trump takeover of the Kennedy Center board, what's going to happen long term with that organization? And is it going to shrink so much that it will be just a skeleton staff and hardly any programming? And what I want to encourage people in the arts field to be thinking about is, how are we going to rebuild after this time? And what is our long-term vision? I think we missed, as a field, an opportunity to reinvent during COVID. And I think we have another opportunity now with the NEA shrinking down, government funding shrinking, foundation funding being in flux. How are we going to reinvent where we are, again, working on these areas that are more under our control, earned revenue and individual giving to support our organizations. And something else that I've written about in one of my most popular posts on my blog, which is called Row X and on artsjournal.com, is about there was an artistic director who was saying, got a big grant from a foundation, and he said, we need more people like this. And I say, yes, we do. But what would be even better is if we had thousands and thousands of people giving small donations, because that would show that the arts are of value to many, many people. What we're missing is a sense that people are supporting, that the arts are valuable in people's lives. There's many theaters that have closed down. Just this week, there's a contemporary art museum in Raleigh that's going to close. And these organizations are closing with a whimper. There are not protests in the streets when these organizations close because there is not broad support for them. And that's what I think we need to be developing much more. I think we've been much too insular and much too focused a lot more on kind of artistic purity, more than trying to drive value for the people that we are serving. So I would really challenge arts organizations to think about, is your primary mission to serve artists, which is totally fine. And then you are there to nurture them, develop them, and have them have an outlet for their work. In which case, your funding would mostly come from probably foundations and maybe large gifts, more like patrons, right, that are personally invested. Or are you here to serve the public and serve your community and serve the broad public in person, online? And that is a different orientation. And people will say, oh, we can do both. I think one needs to be first.
Yeah.
And I would really challenge organizations to think about that for themselves, and either answer is fine. But if you are going to be public facing, then you need to be thinking about how are we making art meaningful in people's lives. And people want it, that people want meaningful experiences, and you can serve that. And then your decisions, your strategy will fall from that ultimate peak mission. And that drives different strategy than if you are serving artists and you are serving as a place that's developing them. So I think that's a very fundamental challenge that I would like to put out for people to choose a path in that way, because they do drive different. They do really drive different outcomes. So that's what I would like. I have this card on my board back here that says restoration but better. And I met a PhD political science student from Spain at a conference I was at. And he said that is always how political change happens. The politician that wins promises restoration, but better. That's what the Trump campaign did. We want to restore the past, but better. And so what is our restoration but better? We still want art to be meaningful. We still want the community to invest back into the arts, and we want to see this virtuous cycle. But how are we going to do it better than we have been doing, which has resulted in a shrinking audience and has allowed even these big government funders to go away with a whimper, and lots of organizations to go away with a whimper too. I wanted the arts to be so meaningful that if there's a threat to them, people are marching in the streets.
Right. And there's a lot here because so the first thing about the tippy top and the thing, you benefited, but because there's no video, nobody else benefited from the appearance of Penny the Bulldog. It was knocking on the door like, let me in, let me in. But I think people they fail to recognize and answer the question, what does success look like?
Yeah.
And this is like this is the key to me when I go and teach strategy to people. As like going, we got to start with this, because all the answers flow from the answer to that question, right? Every question we ask, every decision we make, it comes from there, because like you said, there are two different paths. And you need to choose one. You can probably do both, a little bit of them, but but if you try to prioritize both, that doesn't usually work.
Mhm.
So that's super, super important. Um, when you talk about restoration but better, I think one of the things that people are it confuses them is like they that they're with restoration but better, there's a sort of stripping
Mhm.
down of the old, and if you restore it but better, there's the essence and the soul remains. And this is like branding, right? Like
Right.
it's the soul of the brand will still be there, but like the thing is, it's like over time it renews itself, but the soul's still there. And that's what, to me, when I hear it, I think that's what restoration but better means. Is like you
Mhm.
keep the soul, but the body and the organization continues to move and adapt to the world around us. And I think that the challenge for a lot of people is it's restoration but better. Like you said, like that was the promise of the Trump campaign. We're going to take you back to the old days, but it's going to be better. Is like you become backwards looking, and you just try to like, you know, recreate something that's like a sort of mythical past.
Right.
And the thing is that like, well, no, we're always moving forward, right? There's no turning back the clock. But what we can do is we can take all the lessons we've learned and we can create something that's better and stronger than it was before, but that doesn't lose the mission, and
Right.
I think that's where people maybe lose a little bit of sight of it, and
Mhm.
which leads into the interesting thing you said was like it was a missed opportunity to rebuild after COVID, which is I think one of the reasons we find ourselves in this sort of pattern where
Mhm.
it's like we things kind of went forward, we thought they were getting better, but we didn't fundamentally reinvent anything or change
Mhm.
anything. And so now we're sliding back and we're
Yeah.
kind of back where we were. Why do you feel that we missed that opportunity? And what should people be looking at to keep from missing it again?
Yeah. I think, and this goes back to upskilling a bit. I think that we didn't know what to do. We knew
Mm-hmm.
going the our audiences for the arts have been sliding since about 2000.
Okay.
It was happening in small increments, and arts organizations were making it up through contributed funds, so their budgets didn't shrink so much. And so when COVID happened, we just weren't sure if the audience was going to come back, but we knew that we were missing out on younger audiences. There was this gradual slide that was happening. And so then combined with, I wish people had a deeper knowledge about marketing in things like strategy, in things like branding,
Mm-hmm.
and in comfort in very tactically things like content creation.
Mm-hmm.
So, my students, I had a student once say in class, as I was teaching marketing, and I said, I encourage you to look outside of the arts for inspiration because I think there's a lot of regular businesses you can learn a lot from them. And I was having them look at sample arts organizations, and hardly like no one. This is when TikTok was really at a peak, and the
Mm-hmm.
student said, "They're not on TikTok. They don't care about me."
Yeah.
Right? So that's the signal that is being sent out to young people. I had a student that applied for an internship at a major arts organization that had a great fellowship program. And where did she look to learn more about them? TikTok. Where were they? Nowhere.
Not on TikTok.
Luckily, there was a past intern who made a video about how great their internship was. So she had confidence then to apply for
Mm-hmm.
this and get it, and she's a star. So I think there's also just a desire. What I really see as the core of the absolute dearth of good, especially video content, is fear and control. Because what they are putting out looks like a television commercial, looks very polished, very put together, where that does not fit what those platforms are. So I think that there was just a bit of crossing the fingers and hoping things would go back. I think there was denial that reinvention was necessary. And then, and and again, to be very, very fair, it was a highly uncertain time. We had
Mhm.
no idea what was, what was going to be happening, but these were pre-existing problems. So to use that time when there was PPP money, keeping the staffs open, we did not have the wherewithal and a certain lack of skill. Again, with all due respect to all of the staffers, to reinvent. And
Mhm.
now we're finding ourselves on the other side. And I wish I saw more action coming. There's some, there's some green shoots, that are happening because people are inventive at
Yeah.
the small grassroots level. And so I'm hopeful that they will grow and inspire some of the larger organizations too. So I try also in my writing to hold up, where I see really people doing interesting things
Yeah.
as ideas going forward.
Maybe I'll have to do some TikTok
Yeah,
videos because I know that, like I said, I mentioned Rory earlier. Like when people talk about like, oh, it's very polished. I was like, oh no, it's like him sitting like in his chair with like a drink and like
yeah,
going, all right, here's like something about advertising and branding, and it works.
yeah.
And I agree with this about there was uncertainty, um, but it was uncertainty that was met with inaction as
Hmm.
opposed to uncertainty and built with like the idea of like, well, I maybe can't fix everything, but can I fix something?
Yeah,
And the frustrating thing for me, because I've been harping on this thing about the importance of the brand and the importance of the strategy for however long we've known each other. And before that, I was saying it. So, is there still this, a little bit of the attitude of like, well, you just don't understand.
there is definitely, and
And
they
I'm like,
say, well, how could
well,
I mean the pushback that when I talk
we
about
understand. We
they
did the
don't
jobs.
we have limited money is always the what nonprofit folks turn to, and I have two very specific answers to that. The metaphor one of the metaphors I use to talk about branding is a foundation on a house. It
Mhm.
is the foundation. So your sales is the house on top of that, right? So you
Yep.
wouldn't just build your house right in the mud, you build a strong concrete foundation under it. So it helps your sales to go further. So your sales will be more effective if
Mhm.
you have that top of mind awareness. That is, if you have that top of mind awareness, then when you come in with a
Yep.
sales message, it'll be much more effective.
Yep.
And so yeah, take whatever that 60/40,
Yeah.
metric that you shared and move that. It's not, we've spent so much time in the arts with firms like TRG Arts who are great. They have really moved the needle for arts organizations in just learning the sales part. Like before we had that push in the
Mhm.
2000s from firms like that, they weren't even doing sales messaging. So that was like the first, leap. But now the next thing is to build up the learnings and practice in the field about the branding, so that then those sales messages can go further. So to recognize we've already moved
Yeah.
forward
Oh yeah.
as a field, but it
And
doesn't.
Jill and her team, they do have some
They do
really
a
great reports, and they have really great like like webinars, and they do like some really great stuff, like all
Yeah,
kinds of like really really like great stuff that like I'm gonna tell you, like if you haven't read it and you do read it, it'll help you, right?
yeah,
Like it's not even just like the stuff you have to pay for. It's like just the like research and the amount of like value that they give in their like newsletters and stuff. It's totally great.
yeah.
Like, I mean, there's not it's just that like, and I understand from a strategic point where they went. Like, if you, it's almost it's backwards because it shouldn't be this way, but it's not their fault. It's not anybody's fault. It's that they had to get people just to be able to start doing the right thing with the sales thing to even get to the conversation
Right.
about strategy and branding, because that would have been far too removed.
Yeah.
right? Because you had to get somewhere, you had to get that far
At the
to
start.
even start having this.
Yeah. So to a comment in one of your brief blog posts recently, where you were pushing back on Drew McManus a bit, making a point about data-driven decisions.
My
It's
enemy.
been such a leap to even get people to be data-driven. So no wonder they're following sales reports, because then they feel like, oh, great, I've learned this. I'm now competent at this. I can track sales messages.
Yeah.
Branding is not so trackable. It's only trackable as a trend over time,
Yep.
right? Because it's lifting up the bottom. So your point was, you said data plus judgment, and I say data, judgment, and creativity, right? So data, judgment, and then a great creative idea, which brings me to, to content creation, that I think people are not investing in content creation because it is branding. It is, again, that kind of unknown. And they say, I don't have money. I have, but to that, I push back and I say, you don't need anything more than an iPhone. How did hundreds of thousands of content creators make their own business with nothing more than an iPhone? And you're saying you can't make content. So I set that aside, but also, why should we be spending all our time on a video content strategy? It's going to reach people all over the world, and we need to get people in our seats in our city. Well, that's now how people find out about what is happening in your city. They are turning to Instagram and TikTok to find out even what's happening in their city. So you are absent from a major way that people get information that are wanting to do things. And a post every couple weeks is not enough. You need some volume, right? We're in the algorithm time for this. You need to get engagement in there. And then they say, well, I'm not a media company, right? And I say, well, flip that and think about it as you are getting your mission out. That is another way of getting your mission. I really would love organizations to embrace this idea of edutainment, that they are educating people about their art form, how it's made, why it's fun, why it's interesting, how it makes their lives better through a platform like social media. And then it also serves as building, that's part of that foundation that they're building their house on, that it raises that top of mind awareness. So then when you do come in with a sales message, it does much, much better. Yeah. So those are the pushbacks that I see and hear when I talk about content creation. And somebody said, well, do you expect me to compete with big business? I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, you are, and you can, right? There's a law firm in Tennessee, I think, that I follow called Higgins Law Firm and they have the most hilarious series on TikTok where they ask their lawyers legal interpretations of fictional situations. They say, okay, so from The Little Mermaid, is Ursula's contract enforceable? And they say, okay, well, let's think about this, right? And it's hilarious, and it's a great way to get out their message, right? And guaranteed their business has grown in wherever they are, even though their videos are seen, around the world. So I would just
to fill the top of the funnel.
Totally.
Not everybody's going to get through.
Yeah.
But you can still hit these people. Yeah. I'm going to look up Higgins Law Firm. I want to know. This is great.
I mean, they're a great example. Again, there's some staffer with an iPhone had this idea, right? And they walk around. So if you're not, I think get out from behind your desk, take your iPhone. I mean, we're in a theater, you're in a theater, for goodness sakes, or a symphony. There are interesting visual things happening all the time. Content shouldn't be hard to make.
Go show people what the backstage looks like. One of the most incredible things you could do, anybody could do this. Anybody who's listening to this, they can steal this idea, because I don't care. It's not, it wasn't mine. I didn't do it. I just took part in it. Was because of the stuff I was doing in New York at the time. I got a backstage tour of the Schubert Theater for Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And so they let me play with the coconuts. It was amazing, right? Yeah. It was so great. I was like, you can't give everybody the Schubert Theater. what you can do though is you can take them behind the scenes a little bit and show them like going, oh my God, so like the sets, so this is how they look like when they're all, so they look so huge on stage, and maybe you like have a little, if you get fancy, have a little cut of what it looks like on stage. You're like, it's just a flimsy little thing, and like have somebody geeking out a little bit. It doesn't have to be huge, or you could just play with like some of the things and be like going, oh yeah, like when Hamilton comes through, and I've never seen Hamilton, but like play with the gun or something. I don't know. You're like, oh, boom, boom.
So
like, oh yeah.
So I
just
would
like
really
play with it.
In some of the arts organizations, when I look at their social media, I'm like, do you actually like watch TikTok? Like, do you spend time on these platforms? You need to match the content to the platform. So especially any executive director, I would really challenge them, get an Instagram and a TikTok account and spend an hour really looking through the content and what shows up there, and challenge yourself to create a list. Every video you see, how can I make this a version of this in for my theater, for my arts organization? There's because there's so many. You don't have to make things from scratch, and that's you can see what people are doing and the kind of content that works there, and make it. And it costs time. It does cost time, but it doesn't cost money in the same way that, say, a direct mail piece does. So how can you, as people are reinventing... It
helps when that direct mail piece comes.
Exactly. Yeah, it helps. So I would encourage people to be looking at how their marketing staff is spending their time. Mm-hmm. And there's things that should be, by now, like your email should not take a whole lot of time. Like that, we having an email strategy, that should be pretty good. Spending a lot of time arts folks are still pretty focused on getting media coverage, and media coverage has been fractured for 20 years. Do go get it, but don't kill yourself on it, especially if you have no video content strategy. So I would encourage people to be looking at how their staff is spending time and how can they reallocate that in order to make their marketing more effective under contemporary circumstances.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think if you, which we turn it all the way back around to the beginning, I think, which is like, if you spent a half a day, right? I swear to you, I make a promise to you. If you give me any gives me 6 hours, I guarantee that I'll walk out of there with you, and we'll have you will be clear on where you're going, because I've done it hundreds of times. But that's not the promise. The promise is that it will pay for itself 10 times in the first 90 days. Like, I have seen arts organizations I've done this with, for-profit organizations, make 20, 50, 70 times, what it would cost me, but to do it. But what they have wasted, like just just stop wasting time on things that weren't effective. And then if you do it, you'll find that you have the time to make these things. Like, content creation won't be as burdensome, as hard, because you stop checking boxes. And that's what I feel like the real danger is. It's like, oh, well, we have to send out this email. Why? Because everybody sends out this email. Well, what's the open rate on it? We were joking about this before. It's like, oh, it's like 1%. I go, stop doing it. It's useless. My email, which goes out to, I don't even know how many people now, 45% is about the open rate.
Yeah.
There's 12, 1,500, 2,000 people read it every time it goes out within the first hour. Yeah. 45% of people. I was like, well, that tells me that it's probably worth me writing the email. Yeah. If you're sending it out, it doesn't matter how hard you're sending. If 1% of the people are opening it, you need to figure out something better.
Yeah. And the other, again, and the email is the worst about only sending sales messages, right? And again, the content, this is just my pitch to everybody. The content creation that you're doing on video will turn over into email, because then you're saying, hey, look at how the emails will be more valuable, because what you're giving people is a backstage pass. You're giving them something funny. Mm-hmm. A lot of content should be funny. Please hire all of these college students that have been trained in improv and turn them into your content creators because they have a funny bone. And then your emails will have value on their own. And incorporate those more into it. Plus fundraising. You are turning those same messages into, you're demonstrating impact 9 times out of 10, and then you come in once with a fundraising ask, and that will increase the effectiveness of your fundraising ask because they're already sold on the impact of your organization.
Yeah, if every email you send out is a request for buying a ticket, giving me money, then you're honestly doing something wrong, because that's not how that's why your open rates are 1%.
Yeah.
You have to think of terms of the strategy in the funnel, right? The pipeline. But the thing I teach people is always think about the next logical step. What's the next logical step you want people to take? When I see that, and for email, it's great, right? I want them to open it.
Yeah.
So that means that like the subject line is really important.
Really important.
Because if people don't, and I was, again, if I have 45% of the people open mind, right? So that's what half. I was like, I could still improve that, right?
Yeah.
So think about what actions need to happen from this, right? Because I just don't see that that's really the consideration. It's too much like I have a megaphone, I'm going to use it, and you have to think of it more of kind of a dance.
Yeah.
You're trying to get people, to go from the dance to like having a drink to like, let's hang out now. Let's have some dinner.
Yeah.
You want to keep moving people like down through this relationship. If you think about it like a relationship, it's like going to you have a blind date and you ask the person to marry you and you go off on a around the world trip. No, you go like, hey, look, do you want to go get a cup of coffee?
Right.
Just think about it in that like kind of like really rather ridiculous idealized form, but it'll help you because like, sure, you can skip steps, but the thing is you got to earn the right to skip steps. Yeah. And the person who really decides whether or not you're allowed to skip the step isn't you. It's the person who's on the other end.
Right. And what I would love to reframe, everybody who works in these organizations loves this art form and thinks it's fascinating, thinks the details are fascinating, thinks how it's made is fascinating. They can indulge that through making content, right? That is, please make it in an interesting short form way, right? Don't bore people. But that's what people want. That's what your audience does want to know more, learn more. And if you do it in an entertaining way, you also get to share what you find amazing about your organization. So, how did you make that prop? What is the historical fact that your dramaturg knows that just unlocks the meaning of that play? Why does moving the light from here to here illuminate the scene? Talk to that lighting designer. Make it about the people. The people in your organization are the messengers. So take all of that fascinating stuff is happening and share it, right? Yeah, Wouldn't we all love to do that? And that turns back around. So that's why I'm always, again, I'm puzzled why there's not more content creation happening, because the people in the organizations think it's amazing, right? So we need to them to get more, again, get more comfortable with the mediums of how to communicate all of this, so that they can look around day to day and say, okay, that's fascinating. I know how to take a little bit of a slice of that and turn it into a social media post, a little video, a short story in my weekly email that is not about buying tickets, but is about just what's happening here, in order to stoke more interest. Because what we need is some volume. I mean, the number one thing is that we need some, organizations need to be putting out more different messages in order to rise above the noise. Yes, just plain awareness.
I have a formula that I'm going to teach everybody here. This is like, you probably know this one. This one's like might not be new to you, but I think for like the people who are listening, when you're talking about need more different messages, and I learned this from one of my marketing professors many years ago, and it's A plus B is greater than 2A or 2B, and what it means is that combining media is more powerful than just doubling down on one.
Yeah.
And so as you're thinking these things through, think about the different ways you can say the same thing in what different forms, as opposed to like just sending out more. Like it's easy to hit send on the email, right? One of the reasons way back, this is like 6 years ago now that I started the podcast. One of the things was like I had the newsletter, but I was like, but people really like the podcast because in it, all of a sudden I'm getting speaking opportunities in Australia, and I have clients in Australia and New Zealand because the podcast plus the newsletter multiplied, both of them, right? Everything grew. And that's just me. I'm just one person. I don't have a staff, right? Think about it if you have your arts organization, right? Which is, people we're mostly talking to right now, but this is applicable to everybody. If you have an email list, right? Then you have your social media channels. Then you have some PR because you're in your local market, PR people, the newscasters and stuff. If you have something interesting going on, they'll do that. That's 3, right? Because the research shows that you can go up, it's additive, right? It expands up to 7 or 8 times, like different media. So you can all kinds of stuff. You can social media, you can do email, you can do, you Facebook, your PR, radio interviews with like people. You have all these like creative things, and just know that like they give this impression of size, which right because if people are worried about competing with big businesses. You can compete on it because the thing is you're using different medias because all of a sudden you don't know where people are picking up on you.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you're going, man, you're everywhere.
Right. Right. And
it helps.
Arts organizations have gotten good at digital ads and SEO. There's been, again, over the last time, they've learned that, and that's well built in their marketing and fantastic. So again, and they're very used to talking to their local media. So just as you're talking about, please add social media into that in a serious way that matches the platform that you're doing really multiple times a week, right? Which means that you can't be too precious about it. You just got to throw stuff out there, and you can experiment, and just, I think, don't worry too much that something's going to be quote unquote bad. So if it doesn't, you're not looking for a viral, you're looking for consistency. I know consistency is one thing that you write in neon letters all the time. It's just the consistency, but you need to be posting multiple times a week. But viral is not the goal. You want to think about my student that was searching for your organization. So imagine that they learn about it and they don't go to Google. They go to a social media platform and search for you. You need to show up there, right? One thing that's on the horizon that's already happening is how the AI summaries are changing search, and organizations really need to be paying attention to how that is changing and read up on what Google is putting out about that so that you can change. Again, we've gotten good at the SEO thing, that when you search, we do pop up under various search terms and Google Ads and Google Ad Grants. Now there's another a twist is happening right now. So there's a new make sure you're getting up on that tactics wise.
Yeah, and this is like the talk about getting good about digital ads and SEO is because Facebook and Google will train you. This is really an important thing, for at least from my point of view, is just because they're training you and just because you're getting good at them, it's make sure that they fit what you need to do, because they're training you and they're teaching you how to use them because it's good for them. And this is like one of the key things that I try to teach everybody. Again, it's like some of these things are easy to do and they feel good because, right, like you said at the start, people are very comfortable with the tactics. Make sure it's the right thing for you, and that's the strategy. And and that's really where there's so much trouble. Is like we need to focus on the strategy. I think that we could probably keep going here, but
forever, right?
We've gone on for quite a while, and we got to save stuff because now you have the open invitation. So it's like you just tell me when you're coming.
Great.
But where can people find you?
Sure. So I am very active on LinkedIn, so you can search for me there. I have my own website, hannahgrannemann.com. Make sure you put in all the N's. There's 2 N's everywhere. And then I also write a blog on artsjournal.com, which is called Row X.
Yep. Perfect. Well, Hannah, it's always great to talk to you.
Yes.
And thank you for doing this.
Great. Thanks for having me again.
What did you think of my conversation with Hannah? Send me an email,
There we go.
dave@davewakeman.com. Check out the website, davewakeman.com, and get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. Help me out here as well. I want to schedule some more conversations. I want to know who you want to hear from, what topics you want me to cover, anything of interest to you. So send me the email, dave@davewakeman.com, and I will take these things into consideration. As always, I want to thank you so much for being here. If you dig the podcast, which if you made it an hour and 5 minutes into this thing, who am I kidding? You do. Make sure you rate, review, and share the podcast. It helps me grow, helps people find out, helps me get great guests like Hannah. It helps a lot. But most importantly, thank you for being here, because 7 years into this thing now, I couldn't do it without you. I want to thank you for listening, and just thank you for spending some time with me. And until next time, take it easy. I'll talk to you soon.